Hey, Alex Sanfilippo here, co-founder of Podmatch.com, a service that connects podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. And today I'm going to talk about podcast monetization. Have you ever heard anyone talk about this topic before? Probably. A lot of people cover this topic, but I find that we're very repetitive in podcasting. No matter where you get your information, it seems to be the same few things that we all talk about when it comes to monetizing a podcast, quote unquote. But it doesn't work for the 99% of us. And I'll get into that in a little bit here, but I really want to share how you can start monetizing your podcast today, regardless of the size of the show. And I'm also going to answer the burning question, right, that I put in the title here, how Joe Rogan could have become a billionaire and kept his soul at the same time. Now, first off, no shade to Joe Rogan. I'm not saying he gave up his soul or anything like that, but if you know anything about the journey of the Joe Rogan experience, it's that he went exclusive with Spotify, which then took his podcast away from all the other players everywhere else. You can only get it on Spotify, and of course there's snippets everywhere, right? But it lives on Spotify. And as soon as he did that, members of the Spotify team started freaking out because they didn't like certain content they had. And now that they owned him, that's why I say, quote unquote, sold his soul, right? They were able to force him to remove certain things and not cover certain topics anymore because it goes against what they believe. And to me, that's like totally against podcasting, which is full freedom of speech. Say whatever the heck you want. That's what I believe in, right? Within moderation, of course. Like there should be some people that shouldn't be able to share certain topics, right? But in general, Joe Rogan just kind of shares some perspectives that aren't necessarily popular, like I'm not getting into any political things here, but aren't necessarily popular. But it was great when he could say that and share his opinion, which might influence somebody in a positive way, versus now saying, you're not allowed to do that because we own you, right? So again, I'm not saying Joe Rogan actually sold his soul, and maybe he had reasons for doing this, but I am going to talk about how he could have not gone exclusive and made way more money in a very simple way. It actually probably would have been less work than working out the contract he did with Spotify. And I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's simple. You have to put in the work with anything you do. And I believe that's the problem with people who train, quote unquote, podcast monetization. We want it to be easy and simple. It is simple, but it's not easy. Easy is saying, just run advertisements, you'll make tons of money. And the reality of it is, going back to my original point, that only works for the 1%. Did you know that less than 1% of podcasters have more than 5,000 people listening to their podcast every week? I'll get into that and share why that matters in a moment here when it comes to monetization. But before I do that, I want to first off answer the question here, is it realistic to make money with a podcast? If you're new, if you're experienced, if you don't have a big listenership base, like, is it realistic? Yes, the answer is absolutely. It is very realistic, and you can start today, but probably not in the way you're thinking. Again, we have to retrain our mind against sponsors and advertisers. And again, I'm not saying those things are bad, but they're just not the best way to monetize your podcast. But maybe they could be something in addition to, right? So I'm going to share some things here. And before I do that, I've got 3 perspective shifts I'm going to help you make. And then I'm going to get into breaking down some Joe Rogan numbers, which I know is why we're all here, right? And then, of course, I'm going to share some monetization ideas. I have 4 of them I'm going to share with you today, and I'll have more after that as well. So first off, if you want to make money with a podcast, these are 3 perspective shifts you have to make right now. Number 1 is to avoid podcast advertising as a monetization strategy. Avoid the idea of advertising as your monetization strategy. This is where I want to talk about Joe Rogan. I made this sheet full of numbers. I got tons of numbers here. I'm going to round them up. I'll try to mention some of the sources without getting too granular here. I want to keep you here if that makes sense. So here's what we got. Always got to have water, right? Downloads per episode, according to, this is Sportkita, I think is how you say it. And forgive me if I don't know how to pronounce it right. Sportskita.com. It sounds like I'm basically sounding out here, right? But this is the number of downloads on Joe Rogan's show, according to them. And it's 11 million. 11 million in the first 7 days of an episode. And it was actually more than that, but everyone lies about their number, especially the bigger players in the space, so I just cut it in half, right? So I basically said that's not how many he's getting, so I cut that in half, thinking that's probably closer to realistic. He does about 17 episodes on average per month, so it's Joe Rogan Experience, 17 new episodes. So if you add all those listeners in the first 7 days, you're looking at 187 million podcast listeners. And again, I rounded that down a little bit. Some people say it's up to 500 million, some say it's 250 million. Like, the only people who really know is Spotify. Let's put it that way, right? But I do believe this is a good conservative number that will work off. So 187 million people listening to the Joe Rogan Experience per month. Now, what I want to do is I want to just cut that audience into a little piece. We're going to go half of a percentage of the entire audience of Joe Rogan, all right? So we're looking at just half of his audience and saying those are the people that are going to engage and actually pay him. Now, let's imagine that in that half a percentage of people, he gets all of them to pay him $5 per month. for something exclusive, something additional. Here's the thing, Joe Rogan would have to do very little additional work to earn $5 from half a percentage of his total listenership. Very little. And I'll get into how the billionaire side. But what I'm talking about here is how Joe Rogan could have just broken even. So when I looked up the Spotify contract he did, this is according to protocol.com, they said it was around 200 million. And every source I looked at said around 200 million. I don't know what that means, but let's just pretend that's what it was, right? So the contract was 3.5 years. So let's just say 42 months, right? And so I multiplied that half a percentage of people paying him $5 per month, and then which that came up to be almost 4.7 million. And I'm reading these numbers right now. Bear with me, that's a lot. That's $4.7 million per month times 42. That comes up to be $196 million. That is probably a little bit more than his Spotify contract, which means he could have not sold his soul. He could have not gone exclusive and had people like taking away his free speech, right? He could have still been everywhere and probably growing faster and made the same amount of money with, guarantee you, less work than it took to work out that contract. Now, I know Joe Rogan may already be a billionaire. I don't actually know that, right? I know he'll probably renew his contract, and I think it'll probably be in the billions, but I'm just saying the point is there was an alternative solution that was way easier and let him keep creative freedom at its full potential. So that's literally this is simple math, right? Like this took me no time to just figure that out. But what I want you to do is think about how we could do something different, right? The whole idea here is creativity. And when I share the four ideas that I've got for monetization, I'll break those down for each of us. But let's just pretend like Joe Rogan got really creative here. So again, let's use that half a percentage of his total listenership, right? That same number of people that are listening every month. And let's say he actually found something that could add real value. So he could charge them $25 per month. Doesn't seem unrealistic. The Joe Rogan listeners I know are some of the wealthiest people on the planet. Like the people that I know that listen, I'm like, dang, man, like these people, how do they have that time? First off, I don't get it. I do enjoy an episode here and there, but I'm like 4 hours, 3 hours, what? Right? But they're people that are really doing well. And so they all have an extra $25 per month. If Joe Rogan charged 0.5% of his listenership $25 per month for something valuable for them, that would equal in that 3.5-year contract just shy of $1 billion. Again, this is simple. He doesn't have to do much to add $25 worth of value. What could he do? Here's the thing. He could offer exclusive tickets to UFC events, just where they get their own section, right? Or they get something extra when they walk in the door because they're part of the Joe Rogan experience, right? They're getting the Joe Rogan experience. His stand-up that he does, he could have an inner circle fans. Like only if you're part of the Joe Rogan experience inner circle do you actually get the Joe Rogan experience when you're meeting him in person, right? Getting the opportunity to shake his hand or whatever it might be, right? Early access to content. So maybe instead of streaming it live, everyone else gets to watch a 2-day-old replay and everyone else gets it right away, right? Exclusive access to an exit question, to additional questions. Sorry. So like with his guest, maybe there's some additional questions that only these people get to see through like gated content and stuff like that. Access to exclusive swag, which they pay for, right? But they can get access to something. Access to a private community just for other Joe Rogan fans. Something as simple as a Slack channel might be really interesting. Meetups for people in the inner circle to discuss episodes, right? Not organized by Joe Rogan. You find community people all over the place. People can go meet up and have drinks and talk about the Joe Rogan experience, right? Here's the thing. What I'm talking about here is getting creative. That would all be very simple for Joe Rogan to do. All right. I digress on the whole Joe Rogan side of things. I'm going to move into what we can do. None of us have his audience. I can say that with confidence because no one has his audience, right? No one has anyone else's audience. And we don't necessarily want someone else's audience. Like I think so many of us, we dream of, oh, I wish my podcast was as big as Joe Rogan's. It's probably not trying to be rude or mean. It's probably not going to happen. No one else on earth has ever been able to get to that level, right? So we have to just keep that in mind. But what's better is us to find what works for us. So going back to these perspective shifts, the first one is we're not going to look at monetization strategies through advertising, through sponsorships, the way that Joe Rogan did, because I just showed you how he could have become a billionaire instead of settling short and kind of selling his soul, right, when it comes to his podcast. Anyway, the second perspective shift I want you to have is that high podcast downloads don't equal dollars. They don't turn into dollars. And that's what I was just sharing. Like, we shouldn't want Joe Rogan's audience, right? We want something different. I was recently speaking at an event, and I asked everybody, they're all podcasters, I said, hey, listen, hypothetically, I've got a podcast with 770 people who listen every 7 days in the first 7 days of an episode getting released. Should I focus on growing my podcast? Everybody in the room raised their hand saying yes. I said, raise your hand if you think I should try to grow my podcast. Everyone raised their hand. And I said, all of you are wrong. I don't need another listener to this podcast. And I got puzzled faces, probably like you're giving me now, right? Here's why. This hypothetical podcast is called United States-Based Billionaires. There are 770 billionaires in the United States. Therefore, I have reached my entire audience. I don't want millionaires or people that are even making lower income levels to listen to my podcast. I want that 770 billionaires. Here's the thing. Would that show be more popular or more, I should say, successful from a monetization standpoint than Joe Rogan's? Absolutely. In very simple ways. If you can connect those 770 people and find ways to do that, you could at least be a millionaire. Probably 8-9 figures pretty easily just by the deals you'd be able to connect with them. And again, that's a very small podcast when you think about something the size of Joe Rogan's, right? So I want you to have that perspective that, again, the dollars don't directly equate to the number of listeners. It's who you're speaking to and how you're speaking to them. So keep that in mind. And the third and final perspective shift, and then we'll get into the monetization stuff here, is that podcasting is not about making money. I might have just lost you there. You're like, what? What have we been talking about then, right? It's not about making money. The way I like to say this is we should seek to be people of value, not people of profit. What I have found to be true is that we make profit based off the value that we add. Adding value is ultimately gets you paid. What is it that you're doing to serve somebody? What is it that you're doing to help them get better? When you do these things, when you seek to serve instead of to make money, it just so happens that the profit kind of follows that. It gives you more opportunities. And people these days are getting smarter and smarter. They can tell when you're in it for them or when you're in it for yourself. And when you're in it for yourself, they're not as interested in working with you. People want to work with the people they say, you know what, this person's here for my best interest. So those are the 3 perspective shifts we need to have. And now we're going to get into the fun stuff, some monetization here. By the way, in the comments below this, I have a link to a blog post which breaks it down even more, and we'll have links to where you can kind of like do like literally a deep dive step by step on how to do each of these monetization ideas that I have. And I've got 12 more that are all things you can start now that I don't want this video to be too long, right? So I'm not gonna mention it all right now, but I do encourage you, go check those out. Everything that I list is completely free. I don't have a paywall on any of this. I'm doing this because I really want to help people actually make money with podcasting. Here's the thing, going back to the whole advertising thing, people are just not making money that way. They don't have the listenership for it. Only 1% has more than 5,000 people listening, and they're not even making enough to actually consider like livable income, right? So I'm doing this because I want to help and I want to serve, right? As I just kind of said, it's not about making money. I want to help equip you to do that, and I'll just share the best way I know. So here's my top 4, and again, I got 12 more. Everything on that post listed below is completely free. There's no paywalls on anything like that. So number 1, this is my first monetization idea I'm going to share, is to use Podmatch's monetization features. So I am the founder of Podmatch, so a little bit biased here, but if you do have guests on your show, find them from Podmatch. And the reason I ask you to do that is because we actually do a profit share. It's called our Pod Value Initiative with podcast hosts that use Podmatch. So what happens is you actually earn every time you're just interviewing people. We literally take our profit, cut it in half, and we give it half back to the creators that are actually hosting the shows, right? And you're not going to get rich doing this, but what I'm telling you is that with advertising, you're never going to break even on your production cost. But with this, you can immediately start breaking even with your production costs. And that to me is step 1. Can you break even as a podcaster? Podmatch will help you do that, and I break down more ideas. So not just doing the craft that you're doing, right? Interviewing people, there's affiliate links, there's different ways to earn as a creator. And we've done that on purpose because we want to give back to the creator economy because I feel that no one does that. Everyone's out there to try to bleed us dry, right? Try to drown us as creators. Unfortunately, I don't think people have necessarily ill intent. They just haven't figured out how to do this. But we said, you know what? We're willing to take less home at the end of the day if it can help a creator stay in this business to serve the people that only they can serve. Let's help them break even on their production costs. So again, the first idea is Podmatch's monetization features, and I dive deep into each of those. Again, check out the blog post because it'll go into more detail and give you exactly what to do there. Number 2 is to offer paid subscriptions for additional content. Paid subscriptions for additional content. I happen to use Buzzsprout as my hosting provider, and that's just something that they have included. Like you can literally turn it on, and what it does is gives you your regular episodes everyone can access, and then the premium episodes that people have to have a subscription to. And they handle all the administrative, I can't even imagine what goes into that, but they handle all the mess on their end. So all you have to do is decide which episode is it for, the free feed or the paid feed, right? And I actually had lunch recently with the founder of Buzzsprout. His name's Tom Rossi. And he was talking to me about this feature. He's like, man, I wish more people would use this. And he goes, but when I talk to them at these conferences, they always say, well, I don't really have any premium content. And he challenged it with something I want to challenge you with because it really spoke to me. He said, all of your content is premium. It's you sharing what you know and what you have. And man, I could feel the passion he had when he was telling me this. I was like, man, he's so right. If you're sharing something, helping somebody, serving them in a meaningful way, you have a message that is premium. And I'm not telling you charge for all of it, right? Lead with value. But if you have more that you want to dive in deeper, you want to share some of your dark secrets about how you transform through and process through certain things to help other people level up, and they're like, you know what, that's worth it to me to almost have you as a coach. Charge for some premium content. People will be happy to pay for something. Also, people listen to your podcast because they like you. They want something that can take them further. They want to be part of an inner circle. So really think about that. So consider offering premium subscriptions for additional content to your podcast. It's a great monetization opportunity and basically builds you a monthly subscription type business, which in my mind is my favorite. It makes you money while you sleep, right? So anyway, I digress on that one. I really like that one a lot. The next one is a new one. It's called value for value. So I'm telling you here, enable the value for value model. This allows people to actually send you Bitcoin in Takoshis. I think I'm not like super well versed in the Bitcoin lingo, but Toshis or something like that, Takoshis, whatever it is, the little micropayments of Bitcoin for listening, and they can boost it. So if they really like something you're saying, people can literally, while they're listening, use these apps to send you more, basically, cryptocurrency so that you are actually earning as a creator. It's their way of saying thank you. I've seen the creator of podcasting, Adam Curry, do this extremely well. If you go look up Adam Curry, find any of his podcasts, he has value in all of them. And you can hear how he like calls people out that are sending him money in real time. And they're boosting the things that they like that he's saying and stuff like that. It's a really fun, interactive way to build a cool relationship with your listenership because they're kind of paying you as it goes along. It's just a little bit, right? But you're able to have that engagement with them because you can see where they're boosting, when they're giving you money. You can communicate with them in these apps. And it's all value for value, which is part of podcasting 2.0. Again, I'm not going to go into the technical side of it, but it's really cool, and I think it's the future in many ways. Here's the thing. If Joe Rogan would just have done value for value, I bet he could be a billionaire through just that method alone. There's so much potential here. I'll have more of that in the blog post because it gets super technical, but it's actually very easy to set up. I also have a guide, a full tutorial on exactly how to do that. Again, no paywall, no login or anything like that needed. It's just there to help. All right, my fourth and final one here is to save through tax benefits. This is a little bit different, right? So kind of shifting it here because we're like, oh, this is how we make money, this is how we make money, this is how we make money. Start thinking about saving money. What many people don't realize is I live in the United States, and if you live in the United States, you have to check with your CPA per state. If you live in a different country or different anywhere, right? You're going to have to talk to somebody who understands the financial side. In the United States, the government has a lot of tax benefits for things like podcasting if you treat it like a business. Now maybe like, whoa, Alex, business, that's a big word. It's just a hobby, right? Yes, it's just a hobby, but do you take it seriously? Because if you take it seriously, you'll think of it as a business. Keep it a hobby by all means, but just protect it like you would a business. If you simply create an LLC, which again, I'll have a resource in there to show you exactly how to do that on the blog post. But if you create just an LLC for it and you can start writing things off. This camera was written off. The microphone, the camera, written off. I write off an entire room in my home because it's my podcast, quote unquote, studio, right? I write off my internet. I write off part of my utilities, my electric. I write off a bunch of different things. I can write off my clothes because guess what? On-air personality. All these things you can start saving. And there's no reason you can't start saving through like thousands of dollars per year. And when I tell people this, the thing that always blows my mind, people are like, well, we're talking about making money, not saving money. What if you can save more money than you spend, right? If I told you I can give you $500 over the next 12 months or $100 right now, which would you take? Sadly, most people will be like, I'll take the $100. I promise you probably can't turn $100 into $500 in the next 12 months. So you're better off being smart and saying, where can I save? I want you to really think of tax benefits as your partner in podcasting. Because again, this helps you break even. So between Podmatch and the tax saving benefits, you should be able to break even and hopefully even save more money than you ever spent just in your personal life as well because of what you're able to write off because you're treating this like the business that it deserves to be while still keeping a hobby because it's really important. Here's the thing. These 4 things, you don't have to pick one and do it. Do all 4. Go into the other 12 that I share as well. Again, in the blog post, check those out. You can do as many of them as you want, and it's not one size fits all. Because you might be checking this out and be like, Alex, I don't have guests for my show. Guess what? Podmatch won't work for you. But the other 3, plus the other 12, they might work, right? So go through them, figure out what works, and start capitalizing a little bit on the value that you're adding to people. And at the end of the day, what I want to share, once again, is to seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. That, to me, is what this is all about. You earn money based off the value that you're adding. And I want you to have this perspective that that's what you need to do. Your job is to get creative, just like you were when you were launching your podcast, with how now am I going to make some money with what I'm doing so I can keep it going long term and serve more and more people. Again, my name is Alex Sanfilippo. I hope this was super helpful for you today. And again, I have everything you need below. So I would look forward to hearing from you. And hopefully, again, this is going to help you get that monetization taken off.